Imagine a small town where secrets and prejudices hide beneath a calm surface. A white police officer, arrogant and self-assured, humiliates a young black man in a casual encounter, unaware that this very man is actually his new boss. A story of unexpected twists, regret, and transformation. Stay with us until the end to discover how one thoughtless act changed two lives forever. Hello, my friends. I have a huge favor to ask of you. If you enjoy the videos on our channel, I kindly ask you to subscribe and help us reach the milestone of 1,000 subscribers this month. Subscribe and help us make this dream come true. Thank you, and let's get to the story. Springfield is not just another city on the map, it pulses with the living history of its cobblestone streets and the almost forgotten kindness of its residents. Here, every corner holds a memory, every storefront reflects generations of family. The air carries the sweet smell of Mrs. Amelia's bakery at dawn and the distant sound of church bells at dusk. In the central square, where children run freely and the elderly share stories of days gone by, life seems to follow a slower, more introspective rhythm. It is a place where secrets feel safe under the shade of the grand old trees, and conversations are always accompanied by a good cup of coffee. But not everything is tranquil. The city, despite its serene appearance, is not free from its conflicts and prejudices, often hidden beneath polite smiles and cordial greetings. Today, a new face among the crowd is about to trigger a chain of events that no one could foresee. Michael Johnson, a man whose presence is as striking as his opinions, walks through the narrow streets with footsteps that echo louder than usual. He carries not only his briefcase but also a set of deep-seated beliefs that will soon be challenged in ways he never imagined. As the sunlight fades, giving way to the first shadows of night, Michael finds himself at a crossroads of fate. Soon, he will meet David Mitchell, an encounter that promises to be just another among many but is destined to become a crucial turning point in both their lives. The sun had already disappeared on the horizon when Michael first encountered David. It was a typical autumn afternoon, with leaves dancing in the wind as Michael hurried along the narrow sidewalk of Oak Street. His gaze was fixed on his watch, marking every second of his tardiness, when he bumped into David. David, who had just arrived in town, stopped to admire the old fountain in the square when the unexpected shock pulled him from his thoughts. The folders and papers flew, scattering across the ground like the leaves around them. He looked up, meeting the hasty and somewhat accusatory gaze of Michael. "Could you watch where you're going?" Michael snapped, more concerned with picking up his documents than with the man he had just knocked over. His voice carried a tone of reproach that did not go unnoticed by David, who picked up his own things without saying a word. Despite being new to the city, David had already heard of Michael's temperament, known among the residents for his direct and often rude nature. But instead of confronting him, David chose a gentler path, offering a simple "I'm sorry" as he extended his hand to help Michael. David's calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to Michael's irritation, which, though initially reluctant, he accepted. As they gathered the papers, Michael's eyes met David's once again, and something in the stranger's unshakable calm made him pause. By the end of their encounter, Michael stepped away, still a bit unsettled but unable to deny the efficiency with which the unknown man had handled the moment. As Michael continued on his way, the image of David, with his unwavering serenity, began to occupy a space in his mind, marking the beginning of a series of changes that even he could not foresee. After the brief encounter, David slowly walked down Springfield's main street, still pondering Michael's reaction. The city, with its welcoming residents, seemed to contradict the coldness he had just experienced. He wondered what could have led a man to cultivate such bitterness, but he also reflected on his own calm response to the situation. David knew that there was more beneath the surface than first impressions could reveal. As he walked, he contemplated how each person he met carried their own story, their own challenges and prejudices. Still, he chose to see the potential for kindness, even in someone who had received him with harsh words. Night fell, and the lights of the shops began to glow, casting a soft brightness over the cobblestone streets. David passed by a small cafe, where some residents gathered in a warm atmosphere, laughing and sharing their day. He considered stepping inside, perhaps to forget the incident, but opted to continue his stroll, using the time to sort out his thoughts. David's reflection was deep. He pondered how leadership could be a lonely path, especially in a town where he was the face of authority but also a stranger. He thought about the role he would have to play and the expectations he would need to manage, not only as a leader but as a peacemaker. David knew that the next day, as he officially took his post at the police station, his encounter with Michael could have deeper implications than he initially thought. After all, he was the new chief of police, and his actions should reflect justice and understanding, qualities he was determined to instill in his new team. As the moon rose, illuminating his way back home, David felt strengthened by his decision not to respond to hostility with hostility. He was ready to face the challenges to come, armed with compassion and the determination to make a difference in the community he now called home. The next morning, Michael was in a rush to get to the police station, his first day in a new administrative support role. The sun had barely risen, and the city of Springfield was slowly waking up, unaware of the turmoil brewing in Michael's mind. He still reflected on the incident with the stranger from the previous day, unable to shake the irritation he felt at having been put in a vulnerable position. Upon entering the police station, Michael was greeted by a buzz of activity. Officers were moving around with papers, phones ringing off the hook, and there was an energy of renewal in the air. It was then that he saw, hanging on the wall, a photo of the new chief of police. His heart nearly stopped as he recognized the face of the man he had so rashly confronted the day before. It was David Mitchell. Feeling a mix of shock and panic, Michael discreetly stepped back to process the revelation. The irony of the situation hit him hard. The man he had disdained was now his superior. This new reality forced Michael to reconsider not only his actions but also his hasty attitudes. As he prepared for the morning meeting, Michael struggled to maintain his composure. He knew he would have to face David and the consequences of his thoughtless words. The meeting room fell silent as David entered, his presence commanding respect and authority. Michael watched, anticipating the moment their eyes would meet. As David began to speak, his words were firm yet fair, outlining his vision for the department and his belief in justice and mutual respect. Michael felt each word resonate within him, confronting him with the reality of his own failings. He knew he would have to face David eventually, but what he did not expect was the look of recognition in David's eyes, a look that showed no anger but a calm determination. By the end of the meeting, Michael's anxiety was palpable. He wondered how he could rectify the mistake he had made, questioning whether he would have the courage to apologize and face the humiliation of admitting his error. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial, not only for his career but for his own understanding of integrity and respect. David walked through the corridors of the Springfield police station, feeling the weight of every gaze fixed on him. It was his first official day as chief of police, and the atmosphere was charged with a mix of curiosity and expectation. He knew that the first days in a new position are crucial for establishing respect and authority, but also for cultivating trust and openness among team members. As David passed through each department, he made a point to stop and talk to all the officers and staff. He wanted to get to know the people behind the badges, understand their concerns and aspirations. His manner of interaction was calm and welcoming, very different from the authoritative image many expected from a chief. In the eyes of the staff, especially the more seasoned ones, there was a mix of surprise and relief. David's approach was refreshing, and his genuine interest in the team members quickly began to break down the barriers of formality that typically surround a figure of authority. In the cafeteria, David sat down with the officers during lunch, engaging in conversations and sharing stories from his own experiences. These informal moments were important to him. It was when true personalities emerged and genuine concerns were expressed. David listened attentively, making mental notes on how he could improve working conditions and team morale. The afternoon brought a series of meetings and briefings, but David kept his door open, both literally and figuratively. Those who entered his office found a man willing to listen, not just to instruct. This approach not only increased the respect for him, but also fostered a collaborative and supportive work environment. At the end of the day, as the station began to empty and the twilight painted the sky in pastel colors, David reflected on the hours past. He felt he had made significant progress not only in understanding the dynamics of his new team but also in establishing himself as a fair and accessible leader. With every small gesture of empathy and understanding, David was slowly, but surely, transforming the culture of the station. On a Tuesday morning, the Springfield police station was preparing for the weekly team meeting. David Mitchell, now more familiar with his colleagues, walked calmly through the corridors, greeting each one by name, a simple gesture that strengthened bonds and elevated morale. The respect he cultivated daily was beginning to reflect in the faces of the officers, who greeted him with a new gleam of admiration and trust. However, today's meeting would be different. Michael Johnson, still trying to find his place under the new leadership, felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He knew that his past actions and the misunderstanding with David could influence his position on the team, and the tension was palpable every time their paths crossed. When David entered the conference room, a respectful silence settled. With a folder under his arm and a welcoming smile, he positioned himself at the front, ready to begin. His eyes scanned the room, and for a brief moment, his gaze met Michael's. Nothing was said, but the silent exchange spoke volumes. Michael looked away, uncertain about how to interpret this nonverbal communication. David began the meeting by highlighting the team's recent achievements, making a point to mention individual contributions, including some initiatives from Michael that had improved operational efficiency. Michael, surprised to be positively recognized, felt a slight relief, but the internal tension still persisted. As the meeting progressed, David addressed points of development and new policies with a clarity that encouraged feedback. He listened attentively, demonstrating a genuine interest in the concerns of his team. This openness to dialogue not only reinforced his leadership but also promoted a more integrated and respectful work environment. As he concluded, David thanked everyone for their dedication and commitment, reiterating his open-door policy. Michael remained seated as the others began to disperse, pondering the right moment to approach. There was still a path to traverse in building a solid relationship with David, but the shared silence from earlier seemed, in some way, a subtle invitation for a new beginning. After the meeting, Michael lingered in the conference room, rolling the papers in his hands, his thoughts swirling like the autumn leaves outside. The now empty room echoed with the resonance of his own uncertainties. He knew he was at a decisive moment, one that required more courage than he usually needed for his administrative duties. Walking slowly to the window, Michael observed the daily life of Springfield unfolding outside. People came and went, each absorbed in their own concerns and joys, unaware of the internal storms of a man within the station. It was in this moment of reflection that Michael began to confront his own prejudices and fears. He realized that his attitudes were not simply the result of a bad day or a foul mood, but of a deeper resistance to change and the unknown. Turning away from the window, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each inhalation. He knew he could not undo the past, but he had in his hands the ability to shape the future. David's figure, with his calm and inclusive leadership, became not only a mirror of Michael's failures, but also a beacon for what he could become. With renewed determination, Michael left the conference room and walked through the quiet corridors to David's office. Pausing in front of the door, he hesitated for a moment, mentally rehearsing what he would say. Finally, after a sigh that seemed to carry all his mistakes, he knocked softly. David looked up, surprised, but with a gentle nod, invited Michael to enter. The space between them was charged with the history of their brief but significant confrontation and with the expectation of Michael's words. He began, his voice initially shaky but gaining strength as he spoke, expressing his sincere regret for his past words and actions. "I was wrong," Michael said, meeting David's eyes. "And I am truly sorry for that." The words, simple but heavy with sincerity, marked the beginning of a new chapter for both, one based on mutual respect and the promise of growth and change. Inside the closed office, the silence that followed Michael's words seemed to carry its own weight, filling the space between the two men with a gravity that David hadn't expected but welcomed. He watched Michael, noticing the tension in his shoulders ease slightly after the confession. For a moment, he simply allowed the silence to speak, giving time for Michael's sincere words to settle in the air between them. David then leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, his expression softened by an understanding that only comes with life experience and leadership. "Michael," he began, his voice steady yet gentle, "your honesty is a valuable first step. I accept your apology, and more importantly, I appreciate your courage in bringing this up." Michael listened, relieved by the acceptance, yet still anxious about what this acceptance truly meant for his future in the station. David sensed this hesitation and continued, "We all make mistakes, Michael. What matters is how we learn and grow from those mistakes. You have shown that you are willing to grow, and that is what truly counts here." David stood up and extended his hand across the table, a gesture of reconciliation and welcome to a new beginning. Michael, somewhat hesitant, accepted David's outstretched hand, feeling the firmness of David's grip as a seal of their new relationship. "Let's work together to be better, both individually and as a team. You have much to contribute," David added, encouraging him. As the conversation came to a close, Michael left David's office feeling as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He knew that things wouldn't change overnight, but the opportunity for change and growth was now clearly before him, thanks to the power of forgiveness and the second chance that David had offered him. Returning to his desk, Michael was more determined than ever to prove that the faith David had in him was not misplaced. He was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that the journey ahead would be easier with the support and guidance of a leader whom he now not only respected but also deeply admired. In the days that followed, a new dynamic began to form at the Springfield precinct. Michael, now with a lighter heart and a more open mind, started to observe David with different eyes. Every gesture of leadership, every thoughtful word of encouragement made him realize how much he had underestimated the man he now saw as a true example of integrity and empathy. David, for his part, continued his journey as a leader, but now with renewed respect for Michael. He understood that the path to growth was not always easy, but he saw in Michael the willingness to tread that path, even if it was filled with obstacles. David knew that change did not come all at once, but through small steps taken day by day. One day, during a break, Michael approached David in the break room. There was something different about his posture, less insecurity, more determination. "You know, David," he began, with a shy smile, "I didn't realize how powerful forgiveness could be until you showed me." David smiled back, recognizing the effort Michael was making to open up. "Forgiveness has a transformative strength, Michael," he replied. "It doesn't erase the past, but it frees us to build a better future." Michael nodded, absorbing those words. He reflected on the impact that second chance had already had on his life. He felt lighter, more willing to listen, to understand, and, above all, to grow. And this was just the beginning. He realized that just as David had forgiven him, he also needed to forgive himself and move forward, leaving behind the weight of past mistakes. And so, a new chapter began. David and Michael, together, started to share ideas, work side by side on new projects, and inspire others to do the same. The precinct, once a place of rigid formalities, began to blossom into an environment of mutual trust, where the value of forgiveness and second chances became a living lesson, reverberating through every corridor and heart. As days turned into weeks, the daily interactions between David and Michael began to deepen. Slowly, a new friendship, born from sincerity and mutual respect, blossomed. During breaks between tasks, Michael often found himself talking to David about topics that went beyond work. They spoke about life, choices, and, most importantly, about learning from mistakes. One day, while having coffee together in the sunny courtyard of the precinct, David looked at Michael with an encouraging smile. "You know, Michael," he began, "we're all in a constant state of learning. Mistakes are an inevitable part of growth, but it's how we choose to react to them that truly defines us." Michael, listening attentively, reflected on those words. He knew he had much more to learn and a long way to go, but he felt grateful to have found in David not just a boss, but a mentor. David continued, his tone now more introspective. "When I was younger, I thought being a leader meant having all the answers, always being right. But I learned, sometimes painfully, that being a leader is about being willing to listen, to change, and to grow alongside your team. And you, Michael, reminded me of that. Michael smiled, feeling a wave of recognition wash over him. I've learned a lot too, he confessed. I realized I was trapped in my own prejudices, my own barriers, and that I wasn't truly seeing the people around me for who they are. You taught me that second chances aren't just for others, they're also for ourselves. These deep and reflective conversations began to inspire others at the precinct. Other officers, witnessing Michael's transformation and David's example, began to join in the discussions, opening their hearts and minds to new perspectives. It was as if a new spirit of camaraderie and growth had taken hold of everyone, a collective desire to become better, to learn more, and to support one another. David knew these conversations were more than just words. They were seeds planted in fertile ground, destined to grow and flourish, strengthening the bonds of the team and transforming the precinct into a place not just of work, but of true community. Each lesson learned, each mistake corrected, brought them closer to a shared understanding of what it meant to be human, fallible, and, above all, capable of change. As months passed, the relationship between Michael and David solidified, evolving from mutual admiration to genuine collaboration. In the day-to-day of the precinct, the transformation did not go unnoticed. Where there had once been silence and distance, now there were laughter, healthy discussions, and an increasing sense of shared purpose. Michael, in particular, thrived in this new atmosphere. He started to get more involved in initiatives he had previously considered beyond his reach, like community projects that brought the police closer to the residents of Springfield. Inspired by David, Michael realized that his role went far beyond what he had initially thought. He now saw himself not just as an administrator, but as a bridge builder, someone who could facilitate change and understanding between people. David, observing this evolution, felt a quiet pride. He knew how much Michael had grown, how much his attitudes had changed. They began working together on a special project, a community awareness campaign to strengthen the ties between the precinct and the citizens. Both believed the police should be seen as allies, not as a distant entity. During a meeting about the campaign, Michael had an unexpected idea. He suggested opening the precinct's doors for the community to come and see the work of each officer, to understand what happened behind the red brick walls. If people know us, understand what we do and why we do it, they will trust us more, he explained, with a confidence that impressed everyone in the room. David immediately agreed, seeing Michael's courage and vision reflected in his words. And so, together, they began planning a special day at the precinct, with guided tours, interactive demonstrations, and, most importantly, open conversations with the community. On the day of the event, the precinct was full of life. Children ran curiously through the halls, parents asked questions, and the officers shared their stories and challenges with a new sparkle in their eyes. The openness and receptiveness of that day changed something profound, not only in the community but also within the precinct. David and Michael, side by side, saw how a simple initiative could create new opportunities for understanding and growth. And there, in that moment, it became clear that true change begins in the heart but is strengthened through actions. The special day at the precinct had been a success. The open doors, sincere conversations, and exchange of experiences, all of this planted seeds of trust that began to germinate throughout Springfield. For many, the image of the police changed. It became less of a distant force and more of a friendly and protective presence, something tangible and human. And for David and Michael, this transformation was a quiet yet significant victory. A few weeks later, David and Michael were sitting on a bench in the central square, watching the tranquil movement of the city. The golden autumn leaves fell around them, creating a soft carpet under their feet. Michael looked at David, and for a moment, remained silent, absorbing what that journey had meant to him. "You know, David," he began, his voice low and introspective, "I never imagined that a change in attitude could make such a difference." David smiled, nodding slightly. "Change starts small, Michael. First here," he said, pointing to his head, "and then here," he continued, touching his heart. "But when it's genuine, it spreads to everything around you. You are living proof of that." Michael felt a wave of gratitude warm his chest. He had never imagined himself sitting there, next to a man he had viewed with disdain just months before. But life has a curious way of teaching us, and he had learned that the humility and courage to change are more powerful forces than any prejudice or fear. That afternoon, sitting on that bench, they talked about dreams, hopes, and the future of Springfield. Michael, with a sparkle in his eyes that he hadn't felt in a long time, shared his desire to continue working to bring the police closer to the community, to create a space where everyone felt safe, heard, and respected. David listened attentively, satisfied to see the potential blossoming in Michael, knowing that he would become a pillar of strength and integrity for many. As the sun slowly set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, David stood up, extended his hand to Michael, and said, "Let's do this together. This is just the first page of many that we will still write." Michael shook David's hand firmly, feeling the warmth of the unspoken promise. There, in that simple square of Springfield, a new story began, a story of growth, change, and a renewed belief in what it means to be truly human. And now, have you ever found yourself trapped by prejudices that prevent you from seeing people for who they really are? How many times have you set aside pride or fear to apologize and turn a conflict into a growth opportunity? Perhaps the story of David and Michael has made you reflect on your own attitudes and the power of forgiveness and change. But now the most important question is, what will you do from here? Are you ready to take the first step toward a better version of yourself? Remember, transformation starts within each of us. Sometimes, all we need is the courage to change, to forgive, and, above all, to forgive ourselves. If this story has inspired you in some way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. We want to accompany you on this journey of growth and transformation. And if you haven't watched it yet, check out the other videos that are popping up on your screen now, emotional stories that will make you rethink life and see the world with new eyes. Shall we go together on this?